Hey guys, Kiwi here. In this video, I'll be breaking down and analyzing the mystery of the disappearing saviors, along with discussing who did it and why during The Walking Dead Season 9. With that being said, major warning of spoilers for everything in the show up to episode 903, and let's jump right into this. So leading up to episode 903, we speculated throughout all the promo trailers along with a dedicated video as well in regards to who could possibly be killing all the saviors. Now that the question has been answered, I'd figured that I'd do an updated video on the topic as we run through the events from the beginning and do a final analysis. So, when and where did all of this start? None of this was occurring during the Season 9 premiere, it only started during episode 902 after the 30 or so day time skip between the two episodes. As we now know, spoiler alert, Daryl and Maggie found out that at the end of episode 903 it was Cindy and the other women from the Oceanside killing the saviors, and that they became inspired to take matters into their own hands to get their revenge on the saviors after Maggie decided to execute Gregory. So this confirms that the Oceanside started murdering saviors after being inspired by Maggie murdering Gregory. This makes sense because we get the first few hints of the murder mystery in 902, first starting with a very subtle hint, Cindy's injury on her hand. She most likely got this while in a struggle with one of her victims, and then she tried to hide it and brush it off, but she eventually went to the doctors to get it checked out and they stitch her up. She says that she sliced her hand open while peeling a potato, and Sadiq just tells her to come see them immediately next time. The second hint that we have of the saviors disappearing is when Michonne arrives at the hilltop to speak with Maggie, only to find out that the saviors' delivery of the remaining ethanol for Maggie's tractor never showed up, because at the end of the previous episode, Maggie and Rick agreed that the saviors would get the shipment of food once they agreed to take over most of the hilltop's labor in regards to the bridge, along with delivering the ethanol to the hilltop. The third hint that we get is also when Alden speaks to Rick about the saviors who deserted the bridge job and never showing up at the sanctuary. Apparently the saviors who disappeared had friends, families, and loved ones back at the sanctuary, so they wouldn't have just up and left on their own. And then finally we can see the POV of the murderer taking out Savior Justin at the end of episode 902, confirming that it is indeed someone kidnapping the saviors, causing them to disappear. And then at the beginning of the next episode, season 9 episode 3, we can see Savior Justin murdered and zombified, now joining the other walkers who were just making a meal out of him. This scene confirmed to us that whoever was causing the saviors to disappear was indeed murdering them and not just kidnapping them and keeping them alive elsewhere. As a side note, it was slightly disappointing to see Savior Justin get killed off so early, not because I liked his character, he was an asshole, but he's a fairly well-known actor from other TV shows such as The 100 among other things too, but I guess it was cool to see him on the show a little bit regardless. Anyways, we see zombified Justin walk away from a sign on the wall that says a final warning, which is most likely what the name of the episode Warning Signs is based off of. I originally speculated that it was the murderer who put up the warning sign on the wall, but apparently the answer is a bit more complex than that. As we know, it's the Oceanside women who are murdering the saviors to exact revenge for what happened to them. Originally, the saviors terrorized the Oceanside group who lived at this building where the warning sign is. The Oceanside eventually decided to stand up to the saviors similar to Rick, but since they had no communities to link up with, they were outnumbered and they lost. As a result, Simon lined up all of the rebels from the Oceanside along with any males above the age of 10 and executed them, which included Cindy's mother along with her 11-year-old brother. This was Simon's final warning to the remaining women that they didn't kill, that if they didn't cooperate from now on, they would be killed as well. It was Simon who wrote that final warning sign up on the wall of their building back when this happened to remind them to obey and that they wouldn't get another chance. The remaining Oceanside women were left alive, but they decided to run off into the woods to try and hide from the saviors and forget what happened, which is where Tara ended up finding them in season 7. But as we know, after living there for so long, they became extremely paranoid of the saviors ever finding them again, causing Cindy's grandmother Natanya to kill any strangers on sight, until Tara changed that by eventually convincing them to rise up alongside Rick Grimes, although they were really just kind of forced to give up their weapons, and then they stood around for the entire war and did nothing until the finale, and then they helped out with one battle a little bit. But I digress. My point here is that the Oceanside women obviously didn't agree with the living alongside the saviors after the war, as they couldn't stand the fact that some of the saviors saviors who killed their loved ones and terrorized and destroyed their community were still alive and walking around without any repercussions of it. Now, if you want a full discussion of how I feel they should have handled punishing the saviors instead of just murdering them in the night, check out my next video where I break down and explain why I feel Arot should have been spared. Anyways, a bunch of drama breaks out in episode 903 as Savior Jed wanted to get to the bottom of his friend Justin disappearing, as Jed must have went back to the sanctuary after Justin left to find out that Justin never arrived. Jed went to go out looking for Justin with Negan's previous lieutenant, who he must have convinced to come along with him. They find Maggie traveling along the road, and they give her a hard time by stopping her in an uncomfortably familiar fashion to the way that Maggie kept getting stopped on the road the night that Glenn died, and they start asking her about the disappearing saviors. Maggie says that she doesn't know anything about it and that she's just on her way to deliver her shipment of food as promised, even though her ethanol never arrived from the sanctuary. The saviors state that the ethanol shipment disappeared as well, as those saviors never returned, adding onto the list of disappearing saviors. The saviors leave Maggie alone eventually, but she ends up finding a zombified savior Justin wandering out of the forest alone. Maggie goes back to the camp where the bridge workers are, and Savior Jed confronts everyone there on the fact that the saviors are missing and now Justin has turned up murdered. Some people like Carol and Alden try to break it up, but although I hate to say it, the saviors have a right to be upset and paranoid, and Carol probably should have said more than just telling them to go away. No, the saviors didn't have to be assholes about it, but even saviors Laura and Arot held them back, saying that they don't want violence, they just want to know what the hell is going on. Rick ends up breaking up the drama temporarily, but then kinda causes more by confronting Daryl, along with telling Father Gabriel to keep an eye on Jadis. After the two teams get called to help Maggie and Sydney, who were getting overrun by walkers, they realize that one group never showed up, so they go to investigate. They find Beatrice from the Oceanside knocked out, and she states that Arot went missing. Since it was Cindy, Beatrice, and their friends who actually kidnapped Arot, is Beatrice faking getting knocked out here? And was this all just one big elaborate orchestrated kidnapping by the Oceanside women to kidnap Arot? I don't think that Beatrice was legitimately knocked out by Arot when they kidnapped her, because they wouldn't have just left Beatrice on the ground like that after taking care of Arot. Since Arot was successfully kidnapped, I assume that Beatrice was faking it, and this is just a cover-up story, especially since Sydney was the one who ended up checking Beatrice's pulse to see if she was still alive. So there wasn't much information anywhere online or on the Wikia in regards to this next part, but while Maggie and Daryl are out looking for Arot, Daryl finds an arrow in a zombie, and he says that he knows who took Arot. Now initially I wasn't sure if it was a bolt from a crossbow or an arrow from, a bow and arrow, so I was maybe thinking that it could have been Dwight or something, but apparently this causes Daryl to just instantly clue in and realize that it's the Oceanside who's causing the saviors to disappear. I thought maybe he knew for some sort of inside reason that would have been explained later, but we don't really get an explanation, so did I miss something, or are we just supposed to assume because this is an arrow and the Oceanside is known to use bow and arrows? Either way, they end up going to confront the Oceanside, so they decide to go and check where the Oceanside previously lived before the saviors terrorized them. Daryl asks Maggie how she even knows about this place and where it is, and she just says that she thinks it's where the Oceanside used to live, and that it's what she'd do if she were them, in regards to going back to where they used to live, but she never really says how she found it out. She could have just said, oh, Cindy told me while we were farming, but I don't know. Anyways, they approach the building, and they see the missing ethanol shipment that was supposed to be delivered to the hilltop for Maggie, and then they also hear a distant voice telling someone to beg. They walk around the building to find Sydney and the other Oceanside women about to execute Arot, but due to one reason or another, Maggie and Daryl actually decide to walk away from this, turning a cold shoulder to Arot, allowing the Oceanside to kill the final savior who was there to murder their loved ones alongside Simon. Since Arat was killed exactly where she murdered Cindy's brother, I imagine that they did the same thing for Justin as well, killing him near the warning sign where we saw him at the beginning of the episode getting zombified. It also makes sense that the Oceanside women were the murderers because of the way that Justin reacted to whoever we had the POV shot of at the end of episode 902. I'm just going to assume it was Cindy, although it doesn't really matter. He implied that the murderer should be back at camp, implying that there's someone who stays there, and then Justin didn't seem threatened in any way because he instantly let down his guard. We had previously seen that Sydney was a member of the camp, so she's obviously a suspect, and Justin had no beef with her, so he had no reason to keep his guard up when he saw her while walking home drunk. So that's it, the explained story of who was causing the disappearance of all the saviors during the beginning of season 9, along with why the Oceanside was murdering them for revenge. Now, if you want to know more about why I believe that the Oceanside should have had the saviors punished for what they did instead of just straight up murdering them, along with why Daryl and Maggie turned a cold shoulder to all of this, actually motivating Maggie to go and kill Negan next episode, look out for my next 2 videos where I'll be breaking down and discussing just that. Leave any thoughts or opinions down in the comments below, but that's pretty much it for the video, guys. I'd appreciate a like on the video if you've enjoyed anything I've said today, as it really helps me out more than you can imagine. Feel free to subscribe for more Walking Dead content in the near future, and if you'd like to take that extra step in helping support the channel, consider checking out my Patreon as well. Follow me on Twitter too if you'd like, link to both of those in the description. I'm fairly active on Twitter even when I'm not posting videos, and I'm always retweeting everything I can involving the Walking Dead universe. But anyways, guys, as always, I thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out!